I stared at the photo on my phone of my family toasting to a perfect Thanksgiving without me. I was not invited because last year, my stepmother slapped me in the kitchen, and they all pretended it never happened. They have no idea I am now the CFO of a startup valued at $20 million. I checked my watch. The legal papers would arrive at exactly 7:30. Last year I left in silence, but tonight I am returning with the truth. My name is Destiny Carpenter. I am 24 years old. I live on the 18th floor of a glass-walled building in Riverton, Ohio, overlooking a city that looks like a circuit board of gray and amber lights against the winter sky. It is Thanksgiving. The air inside my apartment is filtered, silent, and smells faintly of expensive leather and the espresso I brewed 20 minutes ago. There is no turkey roasting in my oven. There is no cranberry sauce staining my countertops. There is only the hum of the refrigerator and the glow of my smartphone screen illuminating the dark room. I look down at the image glowing in my palm. It was a photo posted on social media only 3 minutes ago. The caption read, "Blessed beyond measure. Family is everything." There they were, the Carpenter family. They were gathered around the mahogany table in the dining room of the Mapleford Lodge. The lighting was warm and golden, meticulously arranged to flatter the complexion. In the center sat the turkey, golden brown and glistening. The result of the hoe was burnt out of labor. To the left sat my father, Harold, holding a glass of wine, his smile tight but present. Next to him was my half-brother, Evan, looking handsome and cherished, the golden boy who could do no wrong. And at the head of the table, commanding the room even in a still image, was Lydia, my stepmother. She looked radiant. She looked like the perfect matriarch. She looked like a woman who had never raised a hand in violence in her entire life. I was not in the photo. I was not tagged in the post. I was not even mentioned in the comments. I swiped the screen, zooming in on the empty space near the edge of the frame. It was just a blur of the background, but I knew what was missing. My chair, my place setting, my existence. I turned the phone screen off and set it face down on the marble island. I was not invited to Thanksgiving. The reason was simple, though if you asked anyone in that photo, they would likely give you a polite, sanitized version of the truth. They would say we drifted apart. They would say I was difficult. They might even say I chose not to come. But the truth was colder. I was not invited because last year, in that very kitchen where the turkey was carved, my stepmother slapped me across the face so hard my ears rang for 3 days. She struck me because I asked a question she did not want to answer. And when my father walked in and saw the red handprint blooming on my cheek, he did not defend me. He did not yell. He did not throw her out. He asked me to lower my voice. He asked me to apologize for upsetting the holiday. The family pretended the sound of flesh striking flesh never happened. They pretended my humiliation was invisible. So this year, I was erased. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window and pressed my hand against the cold glass. Below me, the city of Riverton was quiet. Most people were inside, surrounded by loved ones, eating stuffing and arguing over football games. I should have felt lonely. That is what the script says for the estranged daughter on a holiday. I should have been crying into a pint of ice cream, wondering why I was not good enough for them. Instead, I felt a calm, icy precision settling in my chest. It felt like the click of a well-oiled lock. I turned away from the window and walked to the kitchen drawer. It was the only messy drawer in my otherwise pristine apartment, but right on top, there was a thick manila envelope. I pulled it out. It was heavy. The paper felt substantial, authoritative. I ran my thumb over the label typed on the front. Carpenter Family Revocable Trust, Breach File. This envelope was not a greeting card. It was a demolition order. My family thinks I am struggling. The last time they bothered to ask, I was working part-time at a delivery depot, scanning barcodes and loading trucks in the freezing rain. To Lydia, I am a failure. I am the college dropout who could not handle the pressure. I am the stepdaughter who lacked the ambition to be anything more than a burden. To my father, I am a source of vague disappointment, a reminder of his first wife that he would prefer to keep at a distance. They have no idea. They do not know that the delivery depot was not my career, but my research lab. They do not know that while I was scanning boxes, I was building algorithms. They do not know that 18 months ago, I co-founded a company called Northline Metrics. They do not know that the software I wrote now optimizes supply chains for 3 of the largest logistics fleets in the Midwest. Just last week, Northline Metrics was valued by venture capitalists at $22 million. I am the chief financial officer. I own 40% of the equity. I have more liquid capital in my checking account right now than the combined value of the Mapleford Lodge and every car parked in its driveway. I looked back at the phone on the counter. The irony was so rich, I could almost taste it. Lydia loves to play the grand hostess. She loves the Mapleford Lodge because it signals status. She thinks she secured the venue for the holiday through her charm and connections. She believes the reason the venue fees were waived for the Community Heritage Feast, the event she is currently co-hosting and taking credit for, was because of her negotiation skills. She is wrong. The fees were waived because of a donation, a massive, anonymous donation made by a shell corporation registered in Delaware. I am the donor. I paid for the roof over their heads. I paid for the silverware they are holding. I paid for the heat warming the room. They are feasting on my charity while laughing about my absence. I checked the time on my wristwatch. It was 7:15 in the evening. According to the schedule, they would be sitting down for the main course right now. Lydia would be making her toast. She always makes a toast at 7:30. It is her moment. She stands up, taps her glass with a silver spoon, and gives a speech about gratitude, family unity, and the blessings of the year. She performs goodness the way an actor performs Shakespeare. It is rehearsed, projected, and utterly hollow. I walked over to my laptop and tapped the spacebar to wake it up. The screen flared to life, showing my email inbox. There was a new message at the top. Received 2 minutes ago. It was from a private process server named Marcus. The subject line read, "Delivery status, en route." I opened the email. The text was brief. Arriving at target location in 15 minutes. Confirmation of receipt will follow immediately. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. It was happening. I picked up the manila envelope and slid the documents out halfway, just to check them one last time. The legal language was dense, but I knew every word by heart. I had spent nights poring over these clauses with my lawyer, dissecting the financial trail my stepmother thought she had buried. These papers proved that Lydia and Harold had drained the trust fund my biological mother left for me. They proved they used my inheritance, money meant for my education and my future, to buy the very lodge they were sitting in. They committed fraud. They committed theft, and tonight, right in the middle of the pumpkin pie and the self-congratulatory speeches, they were going to be served with a lawsuit demanding full restitution and immediate freezing of assets. They did not invite me to the table. That is fine. I do not need a seat at a table built on lies. I slid the papers back into the envelope and tossed it onto the counter. It landed with a satisfying slap. I would not be there to see their faces when the process server walked in. I did not need to be. The devastation would be absolute whether I was watching or not. But I was not going to stay here, hiding in my tower like a wounded bird. They did not invite me, I said aloud to the empty room. My voice was steady. They think they can write me out of the story. They think if they ignore me long enough, I will just disappear. I walked to the closet and pulled out a long charcoal wool coat. It was structured, sharp, and tailored. It was the kind of coat a woman wears when she is doing business, not begging for scraps. I slipped my arms into the sleeves and buttoned it up to the collar. I grabbed my leather gloves. I walked to the hallway where a small, carry-on suitcase was waiting. I had packed it hours ago. I was not staying in Riverton tonight. There was nothing for me here but ghosts and old wounds. I checked my reflection in the mirror by the door. The girl who left that house last year was crying. She was 23 years old, broke, terrified, and convinced she was worthless because the people who were supposed to love her had hurt her. I looked at the woman in the mirror now. Her eyes were dry, her spine was straight, her bank account was full, and her lawyers were sharks. I grabbed the handle of the suitcase. The wheels hummed softly against the hardwood floor as I walked toward the door. I paused with my hand on the handle, taking one last look at the notification on my phone. 7:20. 10 minutes. In 10 minutes. The doorbell at the lodge would ring. In 10 minutes, the illusion of their perfect family would shatter. I opened the apartment door and stepped into the corridor. The silence of the building wrapped around me. I pressed the button for the elevator and watched the numbers count down. Last year, I walked out of that house into the snow, shivering in a thin jacket, feeling like I had lost everything. I left in silence, biting my tongue, swallowing my pride, letting them win because I did not have the power to fight back. I let them keep the narrative. I let them keep the money. I let them keep the lie. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the ground floor. The doors began to close, cutting off the view of my safe, quiet sanctuary. I am not that girl anymore. Last year I left in silence. This year, I return with the truth. To understand why I am walking away from my family tonight, you have to understand the geography of our dining room table. In most families, seating arrangements are casual or based on habit. In the Carpenter household, where I grew up, seating was a political map. It was a slow, agonizing migration that took 10 years to complete. My mother died when I was 13 years old. She was a quiet woman who loved soft fabrics, rainstorms, and the smell of vanilla. When she was alive, the house felt like a home. It was messy in the corners and warm in the center. We ate dinner wherever we felt like it, sometimes at the kitchen island, sometimes on the sofa watching old movies. My father, Harold, used to laugh back then. He was a man who seemed comfortable in his own skin, but grief hollowed him out. It left a vacant space inside him that terrified him, and he rushed to fill it with the first thing that looked like structure. That structure was Lydia. Lydia appeared 6 months after the funeral. She was an event planner by trade, and she treated her entrance into our lives like a corporate takeover. She did not just move in, she rebranded us. The soft throws and vanilla candles were replaced by stark white furniture and potpourri that smelled like aggressive spices. And then there was Evan. Evan was born 2 years after they married. He was my half-brother, and from the moment he arrived, the oxygen in the house shifted. Evan was not just a child, he was the sun, and the rest of us were just planets hoping to catch a little bit of his gravity. The migration of my seat began the first Thanksgiving after Evan started walking. Before Lydia, I sat to the immediate right of my father. It was the seat of the firstborn. It was the seat of the daughter who held his hand at the funeral. But that year, Lydia placed a hand on my shoulder as I moved toward my chair. Her nails were manicured into perfect, sharp ovals. "Destiny, honey," she said, her voice dropping to that sugary pitch she used when she was being cruel. "Why don't you move down a spot? We need space for the high chair near Harold, so he can bond with the baby." I looked at my father. He was looking at his wine glass, swirling the red liquid, refusing to meet my eyes. He said nothing, so I moved. I shifted one seat down. 2 years later, when Evan was a toddler who needed room to run, Lydia said the side of the table was too crowded. She suggested I move to the end, the foot of the table. It was far away, but at least I was still part of the main geometric shape. By the time I was 18, the table had been replaced. The new table was an oval mahogany beast that seated 12. Lydia invited neighbors, local politicians, and business contacts. She turned our holidays into networking events. She needed the main seats for important guests. "Destiny, you don't mind squeezing in by the buffet, do you?" she asked. It was not a question. So I ended up on a folding chair, positioned at the corner of the room, right next to the swinging door that led to the kitchen. I was no longer at the table. I was adjacent to it. I was close enough to hear the laughter, but far enough to know I was not part of the joke. That spot defined my entire existence in the Carpenter house. I was the girl near the kitchen door, the girl who was handy for fetching more water or clearing the plates, but not essential enough to be heard. My father watched this happen. That is the part that sat in my stomach like a stone for a decade. He watched his wife push his daughter to the edge of the room, And he never once said, "Bring her chair back." He chose peace over protection. He chose the quiet life with Lydia over the messy, difficult loyalty of being a father to a grieving girl. I learned to be quiet. I learned to make myself small. But while my voice disappeared, my mind started working in overdrive. I became obsessed with how things worked. While other girls my age were reading fashion magazines or worrying about prom dates, I was at the library reading about supply chains. I was fascinated by the way traffic lights were synchronized. I spent hours staring at maps of the city, tracing the routes of garbage trucks and mail carriers, trying to figure out if they could be more efficient. Data was safe. Data did not lie. Data did not pretend to love you and then move your chair to the corner. One afternoon, when I was 19, I made the mistake of showing Lydia a project I was working on. I was attending the local community college because Lydia said a university was too expensive for someone with no clear direction. I had mapped out a theoretical improvement for the school bus routes in our district that would save the county 15% on fuel costs. I was proud of it. I thought, finally, they would see that I was smart. I spread the maps out on the kitchen island. Lydia walked in, holding a glass of iced tea. She looked down at the complex web of lines and calculations. "What is this mess?" she asked. "It is a logistics plan," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I think I have a knack for this. I was thinking of transferring to a program for operations management." Lydia laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, like glass breaking. "Logistics? Destiny? Look at you. You are not an engineer. You are a dreamer. This is just scribbling. It is not real work. Real work is people skills. Real work is what your father does. What I do. This?" She flicked the edge of my map with her finger. "This is just a way for you to avoid talking to people because you are socially awkward." I looked at my father, who was reading the newspaper at the table. He turned the page. "Harold, tell her," Lydia said. "Tell her not to waste her time on fantasies." My father sighed. He looked over his glasses at me. "Destiny, maybe you should focus on something more practical, something softer. You know how you get overwhelmed." I folded up my maps. I put them in my backpack. I never showed them anything ever again. I kept going to community college, but I stopped talking about my classes. To pay for my books, I took a job at a local courier company. It was unglamorous work. I drove a battered van, delivering packages to warehouses and office buildings. I wore a brown uniform with a name tag. To my family, this was the final proof of my failure. "She is a delivery girl." I heard Lydia tell a neighbor on the phone once. "Yes, it is tragic. We tried to push her, but some children just do not have the drive. We focus our energy on Evan now. He is testing in the 99th percentile for math." They saw a girl in a brown uniform carrying boxes. They did not see that I was rewriting the dispatch software for the entire depot in my head while I drove. They did not see that I was memorizing the flow of the city, learning the pulse of commerce, understanding the gaps where efficiency was bleeding out. They saw a dead end. I saw a roadmap. But the breaking point was not the insults. It was the theft. My mother had left a trust fund. It was not a fortune, but it was significant. It was meant to be mine when I turned 25. It was supposed to be my safety net, my tuition, my down payment on a life away from Lydia. My father was the trustee. He had the power to access it for emergency family needs. 2 years ago, the conversation happened. I had come home early from a shift. The house was quiet, but the door to my father's study was ajar. I heard Lydia's voice. She was not shouting. She was purring. It was the voice she used when she was selling a vision. "Harold, look at the numbers," she said. "The Mapleford Lodge is a distressed asset. It is a gold mine waiting to happen. If we buy it, renovate it, and turn it into a premier wedding venue, we could double our income in 5 years. Ideally, we can leave it to Evan. It would be his legacy." "It is a lot of money, Lydia," my father said. He sounded tired. "We do not have that kind of liquidity right now." "We do have it," she said. "The trust." My heart stopped beating. I stood frozen in the hallway. clutching my keys so hard they cut into my palm. "That is Destiny's money," my father said. "Alice left that for her." "Alice is dead," Lydia said. Her voice was cold and flat. "And look at Destiny. Harold, look at her. She is driving a van. She is 22 years old and living in the room above our garage. What is she going to do with that money? Wasted it? Let some loser boyfriend steal it? She has no head for business. She has no future." "I don't know, Lydia." "Harold, listen to me," she interrupted. "She is a burden. She has always been a burden. She is an emotional burden on this marriage, and she is a financial burden on this family. We have supported her long enough. We take this money, we invest it, and we make something real. We are doing it for the family. We are doing it for Evan. Do you really want to deny your son his future, just to let that girl squander a fortune she does not deserve?" There was a long silence, a silence that stretched out and wrapped around my throat. I waited for him to defend me. I waited for him to say that I was his daughter, that the money was a gift from the woman he used to love. "Okay," my father whispered. "Okay, we will classify it as a reinvestment. I will sign the papers." I walked backward, step by soft step, until I was out the front door. I sat in my van and stared at the dashboard for 3 hours. I did not cry. Crying implies you are sad. I was not sad. I was finished. That was the moment the daughter died, and the CFO was born. I did not confront them, not then. I knew that if I screamed, I would just be the unstable daughter again. I needed leverage. I needed power. So I waited. I watched as they bought the Mapleford Lodge. I watched as they renovated it with my mother's money. I watched as Lydia preened on social media about her business acumen. And I endured one last year of their theater. Thanksgiving last year followed the script perfectly. The house was full of Lydia's relatives. The air smelled of expensive roasting herbs and expensive perfume. Evan, who was 16 by then, was holding court in the living room. He was showing off his new varsity jacket. "Evan is looking at Ivy League schools," Lydia announced to everyone, beaming. "He has such a brilliant mind. He takes after me." Everyone clapped. My father smiled. That weak, appeasing smile. I was in the kitchen. I was wearing an apron that Lydia had handed me the moment I walked in the door. I was not a guest. I was the help. I was mashing potatoes. I was slicing lemons. I was arranging crackers on a silver tray. "Destiny, hurry up with the ice," Lydia snapped as she breezed through the kitchen. "The mayor is asking for a refill." "I am going as fast as I can," I said. "Well, go faster," she said, checking her reflection in the oven door. "And try to smile out there. You look like a funeral mute. It depresses people." I carried the tray out. I placed it on the table. I saw my seat. It was still there, in the corner, by the kitchen door, a folding chair. No one even looked at me. They reached for the crackers, their hands brushing past me as if I were a piece of furniture. My father was laughing at something the mayor said. He looked happy. He looked like a man who had successfully erased the past. I went back to the kitchen. I looked at the turkey sitting on the counter. It was huge, golden, and grotesque. It represented everything they valued: appearance, gluttony, the facade of warmth covering the cold reality of greed. I had the documents in my bag that night, just copies. I had found the bank transfer records months ago. I knew exactly how much they took. $250,000, every cent my mother had saved. I had planned to just leave, to walk away and never come back, but the anger was a living thing inside me. It was clawing at my ribs. I waited until the dinner was about to be served. I waited until Lydia came into the kitchen to check the bird. "Is it ready?" she asked, not looking at me. "The trust fund," I said. She froze. She turned slowly to face me. "Excuse me?" "You bought the lodge with the trust fund," I said. My voice was shaking, but not with fear, with adrenaline. "I know you did. I saw the papers." Lydia's face changed. The mask of the gracious hostess fell away, revealing the sneer underneath. "You were snooping? In your father's private files?" "It is my money," I said. It was Mom's money. It is family money, she hissed, stepping closer, and we used it to save this family from mediocrity, something you know all about. I am going to tell them, I said. I am going to walk out there and tell everyone how you paid for this. That was when she hit me. It was fast. Her hand lashed out and connected with my cheek with a wet, cracking sound. My head snapped to the side. The sting was immediate and blinding. I grabbed the counter to steady myself. My hand brushed against the carving knife. My father walked in then. He must have heard the slap. He stopped in the doorway. He looked at Lydia, flushed and breathing hard. He looked at me, clutching my face, my eyes watering from the shock. "Harold," Lydia said, her voice instantly turning into a whimper. "She was threatening me. She was going to ruin the dinner. She is hysterical." I looked at my father. This was it, the final test. "Dad," I said, "she hit me." My father looked at the floor. He looked at the turkey. He looked at the guests in the other room. "Destiny," he said softly. "Please, keep your voice down. We have guests. Just apologize to Lydia for upsetting her, and let's get through dinner." The silence that followed that sentence was louder than a gunshot. "Apologize?" I whispered. "Just do it," he said, pleading. "For peace." I looked at him. I looked at the man who used to hold me when I cried. I realized then that he was dead. The father I loved died with my mother. This man was just a husk owned by Lydia. I took off the apron. I dropped it on the floor. "No," I said. I walked past him. I walked past Lydia. I walked out of the kitchen, through the dining room where the guests were waiting for their turkey. I did not look at them. I walked out the front door into the snow. "You walk out that door. You don't come back," Lydia screamed after me. "There is no place at Thanksgiving for ungrateful children." I kept walking. I heard the door slam shut behind me. I heard the lock click. I stood on the porch for a second. Inside, I could hear the murmur of voices resuming. I heard the clinking of silverware. They were eating. They were moving on. It took them less than 30 seconds to erase me completely. I walked down the driveway in the freezing dark. I had no coat, just the thin sweater I was wearing. I had no plan. I had $11 in my pocket. But as I reached the end of the driveway, the cold air felt good. It felt clean. That was the night Destiny Carpenter, the victim, died. I walked toward the main road, and with every step, the crying stopped and the calculating began. I was done waiting for a seat at their table. I was going to build my own table, and I was going to use the wood from their house to do it. I was 22 years old, and I was holding a pumpkin pie that was burning my hands through the oven mitts I had shoved into my pockets. It was a store-bought pie. I had transferred it into a glass dish to make it look homemade, a small, pathetic deception that felt necessary because nothing I did was ever quite enough for the Carpenter standard. But the pie was just a prop. The real weight was in my shoulder bag, pressed against my hip bone. Inside that bag was a manila folder containing 3 sheets of paper. They were photocopies of bank transfers. They were black and white proof that the inheritance my mother left for me, the money that was supposed to be my safety net, my education, my start in life, had been liquidated and wired to a real estate holding company controlled by Lydia. I stood on the front porch of the Mapleford Lodge. The wreath on the door was massive, made of dried cranberries and pine cones, smelling of artificial cinnamon. I could hear them inside, the hum of conversation, the clinking of glass, the laughter. It was the sound of a family that worked, a family that functioned. I took a breath. The air was freezing, biting at the exposed skin of my neck. I told myself I was just going in for answers. I told myself that if they had a good explanation, I would listen. Maybe it was a loan. Maybe it was an investment made on my behalf. I was naive. I was stupid. I was a daughter who desperately wanted to believe her father had not stolen from her. I opened the door. The heat hit me first, then the noise. The lodge was spectacular. I had to give Lydia that. The high ceilings were draped with garlands. The fireplace was roaring, casting a warm, flickering glow over the Persian rugs. There were 20 people there, aunts, uncles, cousins, business associates. It was a performance of prosperity. "Destiny!" one of my aunts called out. She was holding a martini. "You made it. We thought you were working." "I got off early," I said, forcing a smile. I walked toward the kitchen to drop off the pie. Lydia was there, directing the traffic of food like a general on a battlefield. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater and pearls. She looked immaculate. "Put it on the counter," she said without looking at me. "And take your coat off. You look like you are ready to bolt. It makes people nervous." I did as I was told. I hung my coat in the hallway, but I kept my bag over my shoulder. I could not let go of it. It was my shield. We moved to the dining room. The table was set for 22. My seat was at the far end, near the swinging door to the kitchen, next to a cousin who was currently failing algebra and needed a tutor. I sat down. I kept my bag on my lap. Dinner began. The wine was poured. The turkey was carved. For the first 30 minutes, I said nothing. I just watched. I watched my father. He looked tired, his eyes a little glassy from the wine. He was laughing at Lydia's jokes, nodding when she spoke, playing the role of the supportive husband perfectly. Then came the speeches. Lydia stood up. She tapped her glass with a silver spoon. The room went silent. "I just want to say," Lydia began, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion, "how incredibly blessed we are to be gathered here in this beautiful home. You know, when Harold and I first saw this place, it was a ruin. It was falling apart. But we saw the potential. We knew that if we worked hard, if we sacrificed, we could build something lasting for this family." She reached out and squeezed my father's hand. He smiled back at her, a weak, grateful smile. "It took every penny we had," Lydia continued, looking around the table, making eye contact with her relatives. "We scraped and we saved. We went without vacations. We tightened our belts. But looking at all of you here tonight, I know it was worth it. This lodge is not just a building. It is a testament to our family's resilience and hard work." "Here, here," my uncle shouted. Everyone raised their glasses. I felt the blood rushing in my ears. It was a roar, loud and violent. Scraped and saved? Tightened their belts? They had bought this place with a signature, my father's signature, on a withdrawal slip from my mother's trust. I did not make a conscious decision to stand up. My body just reacted. I stood up so fast my chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. The sound cut through the applause like a knife. The room went quiet. Heads turned. Lydia looked down the length of the table at me, her smile tight. "Destiny?" she said. "Do you have something to add?" I reached into my bag. My hand was shaking. I pulled out the folder. "I think you forgot to thank someone," I said. My voice sounded thin, strange to my own ears. "What are you talking about?" Lydia asked, her eyes narrowing. "You thanked Harold," I said. "You thanked your hard work, but you didn't thank my mother." The silence in the room changed. It went from curious to tense. My father put his wine glass down. He looked pale. "Destiny, sit down," he said. It was a whisper, but in the quiet room, it sounded like a shout. "Why?" I asked him. I walked toward the center of the table. "Lydia said you scraped and saved. She said you used every penny you had, but that is not true, is it?" I pulled the papers out of the folder. I tossed them onto the table, right next to the gravy boat. They fanned out. The black ink of the bank logo stood out starkly against the white tablecloth. "That is the wire transfer," I said. "October 14th, $250,000. Transferred from the Alice Carpenter Revocable Trust to the Mapleford LLC holding account." I looked at my aunt. I looked at my cousins. "She didn't tighten her belt," I said, pointing at Lydia. "She emptied my college fund. She stole the money my mother left for me to buy this house so she could play hostess." Lydia's face went from cream to crimson in a single second. She did not look at the papers. She looked at me with a hatred so pure it felt like physical heat. "You little liar," she hissed. "It is right there," I said. "Look at it. It is Dad's signature." Lydia stood up. She moved faster than I thought possible. She marched down the length of the table, grabbed my arm, and yanked me toward the kitchen. Her grip was like iron. "Excuse us," she said to the room, forcing a bright, brittle smile. "Destiny is having one of her episodes." "I am not having an episode," I shouted, trying to pull away. "I am telling the truth." She dragged me through the swinging door and into the kitchen. The moment the door swung shut, cutting off the view of the guests, she shoved me. I stumbled back, my hip hitting the stainless steel island. "How dare you?" she whispered. She was shaking. "How dare you bring that filth into my dining room?" "Filth?" I stared at her. "It is a bank statement. Lydia, it is proof." "It is private family business," she screamed. "You selfish, ungrateful little brat. We clothe you. We house you. We tolerate your sullen moods and your lack of ambition. And this is how you repay us? By trying to humiliate us in front of the mayor? In front of my family?" "You stole my money," I yelled back. "That was Mom's money." "It was family money." Lydia stepped closer. She was looming over me. "And you are part of this family, unfortunately, which means your money is our money. We did what was best for the collective. But you are too stupid and selfish to see that. You just want to hoard it for yourself." "I am 22 years old," I said. "I live in a garage. I drive a delivery van. You live in a mansion." "Because we earned it." "You stole it." And then it happened. Lydia's hand flashed out. It was a backhanded slap, quick and vicious. Her rings caught my cheekbone. The sound was loud, a sharp crack that echoed off the tile walls. My head snapped to the right. The pain was immediate, a searing, hot line of fire across my face. My eyes watered instantly. I stumbled back, grabbing the edge of the counter to keep from falling. I touched my cheek. It was throbbing. I looked at her. I was too shocked to speak. Lydia was breathing hard, her chest heaving. She looked at her hand, then at me. There was no regret in her eyes, only fury. The kitchen door swung open. My father walked in. He stopped. He looked at the scene. He saw Lydia, flushed and angry, standing with her hand still half raised. He saw me, clutching my face, a red welt already rising on my pale skin. He saw the tears welling in my eyes. For 1 second, one tiny, fragile second, I thought he would save me. I thought the father who used to carry me on his shoulders would wake up. I thought he would yell. I thought he would tell her to get out. "Harold," Lydia said, her voice instantly dropping an octave. She put a hand to her chest, playing the victim. She was screaming at me. She was throwing things. I didn't know what to do. She is hysterical. I looked at my father. "She hit me," I said. My voice was trembling. "Dad, she slapped me in the face." My father looked at me. He looked at the red mark on my cheek. He flinched, just a little, but then he looked at the door leading to the dining room. He could hear the silence of the guests on the other side. He knew they were listening. He made his calculation. He weighed his daughter against his lifestyle. He weighed my pain against his comfort. "Destiny," he said. His voice was weary, resigned. "Please, keep your voice down." I stared at him. The pain in my cheek vanished, replaced by a cold, hollow ache in my chest. "What?" "We have guests," he said. He walked over to Lydia and put a hand on her arm, soothing her. "You are upsetting everyone. You are ruining the holiday." "She hit me," I repeated, louder this time. "Did you hear me? She hit me." "Lower your voice," my father snapped. It was the first time he had raised his voice, and it was directed at me. "I will not have this chaos in my house. You are acting like a child. Now, I want you to apologize to Lydia for ruining her dinner, and then you are going to go sit at the table and eat like a civilized human being." "Apologize?" I asked. The word tasted like ash. "Yes," he said. "Apologize for the scene. Apologize for the disruption." I looked at him. I really looked at him. I saw the weakness in his jawline. I saw the fear in his eyes. Not fear for me, but fear of Lydia. Fear of losing his status. "No," I said. My father blinked. "What did you say?" "No," I said. I stood up straight. I took my hand off my cheek. I will not apologize for being robbed, and I will not apologize for being hit. I turned around. I walked to the hallway. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely zip up my coat. I grabbed my bag. Lydia followed me to the entryway. My father stayed in the kitchen, a coward to the end. "If you walk out that door," Lydia hissed, ensuring her voice was low enough that the guests couldn't hear the specific words, but venomous enough to kill. "Don't you dare think you are coming back. There is no place at Thanksgiving for people who try to destroy families." I didn't look at her. I opened the heavy oak door. The wind howled outside, carrying snow with it. "Go!" Lydia shouted, finally letting her voice rise so the room could hear her perform her outrage. "Go back to your miserable little life. We gave you everything, and you threw it in our faces." I stepped out onto the porch. Behind me, the dining room was dead silent. Through the window, I could see them. 20 people, my family, people who had known me since I was a baby. They were all looking at their plates. My aunt was adjusting her napkin. My cousin was taking a sip of water. Not one of them looked at the door. Not one of them stood up. Not one of them asked if I was okay. They chose the turkey. They chose the warmth. They chose the lie because it was comfortable. I closed the door. The latch clicked. It was a final, mechanical sound. I walked down the steps. The snow was coming down harder now, dusting the driveway in white. My car was parked at the bottom of the hill, a rusted sedan that barely started in the cold. I paused halfway down the walk. I could hear it. Through the thick, insulated walls of the lodge, I heard a burst of laughter. Then the clinking of silverware resumed. They were eating. I had just been assaulted. I had just been disowned, and they were passing the cranberry sauce. I stood there in the snow, the cold seeping into my boots. My cheek was burning. But as I stood there, listening to the muffled sounds of their joy, something inside me snapped. It wasn't a break. It was a setting, like a bone being reset. Painful but necessary. I touched the bag at my hip. I still had the papers. They hadn't taken them. "Okay," I whispered to the dark trees. "Okay." I walked to my car. I did not cry. I did not look back at the warm, golden windows of the Mapleford Lodge. I got in, turned the key, and listened to the engine cough to life. That was the night I became an orphan. Not because my father died, but because I realized he had never really been alive to begin with. I backed out of the driveway, leaving the tire tracks in the fresh snow, and drove into the darkness. I was hungry. I was hurt. But for the first time in my life, I was absolutely, terrifyingly free. I drove until the gas light on my dashboard turned orange. I did not know where I was going. I just knew I had to keep the wheels moving because if I stopped, the reality of what had just happened would crash down on me, and I was not sure I could survive the weight of it. I drove past the manicured lawns of the wealthy suburbs, past the iron gates, and the holiday wreaths that cost more than my monthly rent. I drove until the houses got smaller, the streetlights got dimmer, and the snow started to stick to the asphalt in patchy, gray clumps. My cheek was throbbing. I adjusted the rearview mirror to look at it, but it was too dark. I could only feel the heat radiating from the skin, a pulsing reminder of Lydia's ring connecting with my face. I pulled into the parking lot of a diner called the Night Owl. It sat on the edge of an industrial park, a box of neon light in a sea of darkness. The sign said, "Open 24 hours." But the ERS was burnt out. There were only 2 other cars in the lot, both covered in a layer of snow that suggested they had been there for a long time. I turned off the engine. The silence rushed in. My stomach growled. It was a violent, angry sound. I realized then that I had not eaten since breakfast. I had spent the entire day cooking a turkey I did not get to taste, mashing potatoes that were now cooling in the stomachs of people who hated me. I checked my wallet. I had $11.40. I walked inside. The diner smelled of old coffee, frying grease, and lemon cleaner. It was the smell of transience. A bell chimed above the door, and the woman behind the counter looked up. Her name tag said Rosa. She looked to be in her 50s, with tired eyes and hair pulled back in a severe bun. She was wiping down the counter with a rag that had seen better days. She looked at me, and her gaze stopped immediately on my left cheek. I instinctively raised my hand to cover it. Rosa did not grimace. She did not gasp. She just looked at me with a weary, knowing expression. The kind of look that comes from seeing the worst of people at 3 a.m. for 30 years. "Table or booth?" she asked. Her voice was raspy, like dry leaves. "Booth, please," I said. My voice cracked. I sat in the back, away from the window. The vinyl seat was cracked and taped over with silver duct tape. I kept my coat on. I was shivering. Though the diner was warm, it was a deep, internal cold that had nothing to do with the temperature. Rosa walked over with a pot of coffee and a mug. She poured it without asking. The steam rose up, hitting my face. "Kitchen is closed for the grill," she said. "Cook went home to his kids. All I have is soup and pie." "How much is the pie?" I asked. "For you?" She looked at my cheek again, then she looked at my hands, which were still trembling on the tabletop. "On the house." I looked up at her, startled. "I can pay? I have $11. "Keep your money, honey," Rosa said. She ripped a page off her order pad and tucked it into her apron. "You look like you need a win tonight. Besides, it is Thanksgiving. Nobody should be paying for pie on Thanksgiving if they are eating alone." She walked away and came back a minute later with a massive slice of cherry pie. It was heated up. She slid it in front of me along with a fork. "Eat," she said. "Sugar helps with the shock." I picked up the fork. I took a bite. It was sweet, tart, and warm. It tasted like mercy. "Thank you," I whispered. Rosa leaned her hip against the booth opposite me. She crossed her arms. She did not ask who hit me. She did not ask why I was alone. She just looked at the snow falling outside the window. "You know," she said softly, "my husband used to tell me that rock bottom is not a place you stay. It is a foundation you build on. It does not feel like it when you are down there in the dirt, but it is solid ground. It is the only place solid enough to hold a skyscraper." She tapped the table with her knuckles, twice, then she walked back to the counter to refill the napkin dispenser. I ate the pie. Every bite felt like I was putting a brick back into a wall that had crumbled. When I was finished, I left a $5 tip on the table, half my net worth, and walked back out to my car. I did not start the engine immediately. I sat there, staring at the bus stop across the street. A single streetlight illuminated the bench. Snow was piling up on the plastic seat. I remembered sitting at a bus stop like that when I was 13, the day after my mother's funeral. I had run away from the house because the silence was too loud. My father had found me 3 hours later. He had not been angry then. He had just been sad. He had hugged me and promised we would get through it together. Liar, I thought. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The sound made me jump. I pulled it out, expecting a text from my father. Maybe an apology. Maybe a demand to bring the car back, since technically, his name was on the title along with mine. It was not my father. The name on the screen made my breath hitch. Aunt Valerie. Valerie was my mother's younger sister. I had not seen her in 4 years. Not since Lydia quietly stopped inviting her to holidays, claiming there was not enough room, or that Valerie made the guests uncomfortable with her loud laugh and her political opinions. The truth was, Valerie was the only person who remembered my mother clearly, and Lydia could not stand the competition. I opened the message. "Conspiracy of the universe tells me something is wrong. You okay? Des? I have a bad feeling." I stared at the glowing letters. I had not spoken to her in so long I assumed she had forgotten me. I assumed she had moved on. Just like everyone else. I typed back, my thumbs stiff with cold. "I am not okay." 3 dots appeared instantly. Then they disappeared. Then my phone rang. I answered it. "Hello? Where are you?" Valerie's voice was sharp, urgent. It sounded so much like my mother's voice that I almost dropped the phone. "I am in a parking lot," I said, "at a diner called the Night Owl." "What happened?" "Lydia," I said. The name tasted like poison. We got into a fight about the trust fund. Dad kicked me out." "He did what?" Valerie's voice rose to a shout. Harold kicked you out? On Thanksgiving? I have nowhere to go. Aunt Val, I said. The tears finally spilled over. I had held them back through the slap, through the walk to the car, through the pie. But hearing her voice broke the dam. They took everything. They took Mom's money. They took the house. I don't have anything. You stop that right now, Valerie commanded. You have not lost everything. You have blood. Now listen to me. Where are you exactly? Riverton, near the industrial park. That is 2 hours from me, she said. Start the car. Get on the highway and head south toward Crescent City. Drive straight to my house. Do you remember the address? 14 Oak Street, I said automatically. It was a memory from childhood. That is the one, she said. I am putting the kettle on. Do not stop for anything but gas. You come home. Destiny. You hear me? You come home. Okay, I sobbed. I am coming. The drive to Crescent City was a blur of snow and red taillights. The highway was mostly empty. Just a few long-haul trucks and weary travelers trying to get home before midnight. I drove with both hands gripping the wheel, focusing entirely on the white lines of the road. I arrived at Valerie's house just after midnight. It was a small bungalow, painted a cheerful yellow that looked gray in the moonlight. The porch was cluttered with potted plants that had been covered with burlap sacks for the winter. It was a tiny house compared to the Mapleford Lodge. It could fit inside Lydia's living room. But the lights were on. I parked the car and stepped out. Before I could even knock, the front door flew open. Valerie stood there. She was wearing a thick wool cardigan and mismatched socks. She looked older than I remembered, with streaks of gray in her dark curls, but her eyes were fierce. She ran down the steps and grabbed me. She pulled me into a hug that knocked the wind out of me. She smelled like peppermint tea and old books. She smelled like safety. Oh, honey, she whispered into my hair. I have got you. I have got you. She pulled back and looked at my face. Her eyes narrowed when she saw the bruise on my cheek, which was now turning a dark, ugly purple. She reached out and touched it gently. Her fingers were warm. Lydia? She asked. Yes, I said. I am going to kill her, Valerie said calmly. It was not a threat. It was a statement of intent. But not tonight. Tonight, we get you warm. She led me inside. The house was chaotic and wonderful. There were books stacked on every surface. The furniture was mismatched and comfortable. A cat was sleeping on top of the radiator. It was the opposite of the sterile, curated perfection of the lodge. It felt like a human being lived here. Valerie sat me down on the sofa and wrapped a quilt around my shoulders. She brought me a mug of tea and a plate of toast with cinnamon sugar. Eat, she said. Then we talk. I ate the toast. I drank the tea. I felt the tension in my shoulders slowly begin to unspool. Valerie sat in the armchair opposite me. She watched me eat with a hawk-like intensity. When I was finished, she leaned forward. Tell me everything, she said. Don't leave anything out. So I did. I told her about the seating arrangements. I told her about the delivery job. I told her about the maps I drew that Lydia laughed at. I told her about the conversation I overheard in the study, and the bank transfers I had found. I told her about the slap, and my father's silence. When I finished, the room was quiet. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece. Valerie stood up. She walked over to a bookshelf in the corner. She moved a stack of National Geographic magazines and pulled out a small, metal lockbox. She brought it to the coffee table and set it down. She pulled a key from a chain around her neck and opened it. Your mother was not stupid. Destiny, Valerie said softly. She knew Harold was weak. She loved him. But she knew he was a man who needed to be led. And she was terrified that if something happened to her, he would be led by the wrong person. She reached into the box and pulled out a document. It was thick, bound in blue legal paper. The edges were yellowed with age. What is that? I asked. This, Valerie said, handing it to me, is the original trust deed, not the copy Harold has. The original, the one your mother signed 3 days before she went into surgery. I took the document. My hands were shaking again. I opened it. I saw my mother's signature at the bottom. The loops of her A were wide and graceful. "Read paragraph 4, Valerie said. I scanned the page. The legalese was dense, but the meaning was clear. In the event that the primary beneficiary, Destiny Carpenter, reaches the age of 18, the trustee shall have no power to liquidate, transfer, or encumber the principal assets without the written, notarized consent of the beneficiary. Any violation of this clause shall result in the immediate removal of the trustee and the immediate vesting of all assets to the beneficiary, along with a penalty of repayment with interest." I looked up at Valerie. "He needed my permission." "Yes," Valerie said. "He forged it? Or did he just bank on you never seeing this?" "He just did it," I said. "He is the trustee. The bank probably didn't even ask." "Well," Valerie said, her eyes gleaming with a dangerous light, "the bank is going to ask now, because this document proves that what they did was not just a misuse of funds, it was a felony. It breaks the foundational terms of the trust." She reached out and covered my hand with hers. "They think you are weak, Destiny," she said. "They think because you are quiet, you are empty. They think because you drive a van, you are stupid. They made the biggest mistake of their lives." I looked at the document. I looked at the signature. I felt a fire lighting in my chest. It was small, but it was hot. "I don't know how to fight them," I whispered. "They have lawyers. They have money. I have $11. Valerie smiled. It was a wolfish smile. "You have $11 and an aunt who has been waiting 10 years for an excuse to burn Lydia's kingdom to the ground. And you have this document." She stood up and paced the small room. "You are going to stay here," she said. "You are going to sleep, and tomorrow morning, we are going to wake up, drink coffee, and start planning. If you want to walk away, I will support you. We can burn this paper and you can start over. But if you want to take back what is yours, if you want to make them pay for every tear and every slap..." She stopped and looked at me. "I will go with you," she said, "every step of the way." I looked at the quilt around my shoulders. I looked at the document in my lap. For the first time in years, I did not feel like the girl in the corner. I felt like the girl in the center of the map. "I don't want to walk away," I said. My voice was steady. "I want to take it back, all of it." Valerie nodded. "Good. Then get some sleep, kid. We have work to do." The winter in Crescent City was different from Riverton. In Riverton, winter was a social season, a backdrop for galas and ski trips. In Crescent City, winter was a bill you had to pay. It was drafty windows, salted sidewalks, and the relentless gray sky that hung over the smokestacks of the old factories. I lived on Valerie's pull-out sofa for the first 3 months. My back ached every morning, but it was a good ache. It was the ache of reality. I woke up to the smell of Valerie's peppermint tea and the sound of her typing. She was a freelance copy editor, and she attacked bad grammar with the same ferocity she defended her family. I needed money, so I got a job at a coffee shop 3 blocks away. It was not a glamorous job. I spent 8 hours a day steaming milk and wiping down tables. The customers looked through me just like my family used to. But there was a difference. Here, I was invisible because I was service staff. Not because I was a disappointment. I liked the anonymity. It gave me time to think. Every day after my shift, I went to the public library. It was a brutalist concrete building from the 70s, smelling of wet wool and dust. It became my university. Lydia had mocked my interest in logistics, calling it boring. But in that library, I found my religion. I read everything I could find on supply chain management, linear programming, and transportation law. I taught myself Python and SQL on the public computers, typing until my fingers cramped. I was obsessed with the concept of the last mile. In logistics, the hardest part of any delivery is the final leg, getting the package from the local hub to the customer's door. It is the most expensive, the most inefficient, and the most prone to error. I realized that my life was a last-mile problem. I had all the potential, all the raw materials, but I had been stuck in the distribution hub of my father's house. unable to reach my destination. 6 months after I arrived, I saw a posting for an internship at VectorPath Labs. They were a mid-sized data analytics firm in the city. The requirements listed a bachelor's degree in computer science or mathematics. I had an associate's degree from a community college and a reference letter from a barista. I applied anyway. In the cover letter, instead of begging, I included a script I had written that optimized the coffee shop's inventory ordering system, reducing waste by 18%. 2 days later, I got an email inviting me for an interview. I walked into VectorPath wearing a blazer Valerie had found for me at a thrift store. It was slightly too big in the shoulders, but I pinned it back. The interviewer was a man named Miles Carter. He was wearing a hoodie and looked like he had not slept in 3 days. He looked at my resume, then at my script. "You wrote this?" he asked, tapping the paper. "Yes," I said. "Why didn't you use the standard library for the sorting algorithm?" "Because the standard library assumes a constant flow of data," I said, my voice steady. "Inventory for perishable goods is variable. I needed something that weighted recency over frequency." Miles looked up. He smiled. It was a crooked, genuine smile. "When can you start?" I started on Monday. I was the oldest intern there, and the only one without a university pedigree. The other interns talked about their fraternities and their ski trips. I ate my sandwich at my desk and worked. I devoured data. I took the grunt work nobody wanted, cleaning up messy data sets, manually tagging GPS coordinates, and I automated it. 3 months in, I was given a test project. A local trucking company was losing money on fuel. They wanted to know why. The senior analysts were looking at the trucks, maintenance records, tire pressure, engine efficiency. I looked at the map. I spent 3 nights in the office, sleeping under my desk for 2 hours at a time. I overlaid the delivery routes with historical traffic patterns and construction permits. I found the pattern. The drivers were not taking inefficient routes. They were taking routes that avoided left turns at difficult intersections, but only during specific hours of the day when shift changes at the local factories caused traffic spikes. By avoiding the left turns, they were adding 3 miles to every trip. I presented my findings to the team. I showed them a new routing algorithm that adjusted for the factory shifts. "This will save them 12% on fuel annually," I said. The room went quiet. The senior VP looked at the numbers, then he looked at me. "Who is she?" he asked Miles. "That is Destiny," Miles said. "She is the one who is going to fix everything." That night, I went home to Valerie's with a real paycheck. My first bonus. We ordered pizza, but before we ate, Valerie put a hand on my arm. "It is time," she said. "Time for what?" "To see Jordan Price." Jordan Price was a lawyer who operated out of a strip mall office next to a dry cleaner. He did not look like the high-powered corporate sharks my father employed. He wore a rumpled suit and had a coffee stain on his tie, but Valerie said he was the best estate litigator in the county because he hated bullies. We sat in his office, surrounded by stacks of files. Jordan read the trust document Valerie had kept in the lockbox. He read it twice. Then he took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "This is clear," Jordan said. "This is crystal clear. The trust is irrevocable upon the death of the grantor. Your mother, your father had fiduciary duty. He could only access the principal for your health, education, or maintenance. Buying a commercial property for his new wife to run a wedding business? That is self-dealing. It is a textbook breach." "So we can sue them?" I asked. "We can destroy them," Jordan corrected. "We can file for a forensic accounting of the entire estate. We can demand immediate repayment. We can put a lien on the lodge. If they can't pay, we force a sale." I sat back in the chair. I thought about the lodge. I thought about the dining room where I wasn't allowed to sit. I thought about the snow on my face that night. "Is it worth it?" I asked quietly. Valerie and Jordan both looked at me. "I mean," I continued, "I am building a life here. I am doing well at VectorPath. If I do this, if I start this war, I am tying myself to them again for years. Maybe I should just let it go. Maybe the best revenge is just being happy." Valerie turned her chair to face me. She took my hands. Her grip was strong. Destiny, she said. Listen to me. There is a difference between moving on and running away. If you walk away now, you are telling yourself that what they did was okay. You are telling yourself that you didn't deserve that money. You are telling yourself that your mother's wishes didn't matter. She squeezed my hands. This is not about revenge, she said. Revenge is emotional. Revenge is messy. This is about correction. They took the truth that your mother wanted you to be safe and independent, and they twisted it into a lie to fund their vanity. You are not going back to hurt them. You are going back to return the truth to its proper place. I looked at the trust document. I saw my mother's signature again. I imagined her sitting at a desk, signing this paper, thinking she was protecting me. She couldn't protect me from the cancer, but she tried to protect me from the world. My father and Lydia had taken that protection and used it to buy chandeliers. Do it, I said to Jordan. File the paperwork, but don't serve them yet. I want to wait until I have the leverage to bury them completely. Jordan smiled. It was a shark smile. I can work with that. I went back to VectorPath with a new fire. I wasn't just working for a paycheck anymore. I was working for capital. I started spending more time with Miles. We were an odd pair. He was loud, chaotic, and brilliant at architecture. I was quiet, precise, and brilliant at algorithms. We would stay late, ordering Thai food and arguing about code structures. One night, around 2 a.m, we were looking at a project for a client who wanted to track shipping containers. The industry is broken, Miles mumbled, spinning in his chair. Everyone is looking at the trucks. Nobody is looking at the space between the trucks, the handoffs, the loading docks. That is where the data goes dark. I know, I said. I have a model for that. I pulled up a file on my personal laptop. It was something I had been working on since my days in the delivery van. It was a predictive engine that used weather patterns, local traffic history, and warehouse staffing levels to predict delays before they happened. Miles stared at the screen. He scrolled through the code. He stopped spinning. Destiny, he said. This isn't just a model. This is a product. It needs a front end, I said. And it needs a server architecture that can handle real-time ingestion. I can build the architecture, Miles said. He looked at me. His eyes were wide. We could sell this, not to VectorPath. We could sell this ourselves. I looked around the empty office. I looked at the cubicles. I looked at the safe. Steady path I was on. I have no money, I said. I have a lawsuit pending, but right now, I have savings of $4,000. I have $10,000, Miles said, and I have a credit card with a scary high limit. I thought about Lydia. I thought about her calling me a burden. I thought about her saying I had no future. I quit, I said. Miles laughed. Wait, right now? Tomorrow, I said. We quit tomorrow. We did. We walked into the VP's office together and handed in our resignations. He told us we were making a huge mistake. He told us we would be begging for our jobs back in 6 months. We set up shop in Valerie's living room. We pushed the sofa against the wall and brought in 2 cheap folding tables. We bought a whiteboard and propped it up on the radiator. We named it Northline Metrics. Northline, because we were finding the true direction. Metrics, because numbers do not lie. It was not glamorous. We ate instant noodles. We worked 18 hours a day. The apartment was always hot because the servers Miles built generated so much heat. Valerie moved around us like a saint, refilling our tea and proofreading our pitch decks. On the wall above my monitor, I taped 2 things. The first was a photograph of my mother, laughing in the rain. The second was the photocopy of the withdrawal slip with my father's signature. Every time I got tired, every time the code broke, every time I felt the crushing weight of imposter syndrome, I looked at that wall. I looked at the woman who loved me, and I looked at the man who betrayed me. Love and hate. They are the 2 most powerful fuel sources on Earth. I was running on a hybrid engine. Our first break came 3 months later. I had cold called every logistics manager in the tri-state area. Most hung up, but there was a man named Arthur Miller, the owner of a chain of 6 grocery stores called Miller's Market. He agreed to a 15-minute meeting because he liked my persistence. I walked into his office. He was a gruff man who smelled of cigars. "I am losing money on produce," he said. "My trucks get stuck in traffic. The lettuce wilts. I throw it out. Can you fix it?" "I can tell you exactly when your truck should leave the depot to hit the delivery window with 99% accuracy," I said. "And I can route them around delays that haven't even happened yet." "Show me," he said. We installed Northline's software on his dispatch computers. We spent a week tweaking the algorithm. The first week, his spoilage rate dropped by 40%. He called me into his office on a Friday afternoon. He had a check in his hand. "You kids are wizards," he said. "I want to sign a 12-month contract, and I have a brother who runs a furniture distribution center. I told him to call you." I took the check. It was for $5,000. It was not a fortune. It was barely enough to pay for the servers. But it was mine. I walked out of his office and called Miles. "We got it," I said. "We got the contract?" Miles asked, his voice cracking. "We got the contract," I said, "and we got a referral." I drove back to Valerie's house. I walked into the living room where the servers were humming and the whiteboard was covered in red ink. I pinned the check to the wall, right next to the withdrawal slip. It was the first brick in the new house I was building. A house where no one could tell me where to sit. A house where I owned the table. "This is just the beginning," I told Valerie as we toasted with cheap wine that night. "I know," she said, looking at the fire in my eyes. "God help them when you really get going." We were Northline metrics. We were two people in a living room with a vision. But in my head, I was already looking at the map of Ohio, seeing the lines of commerce connecting, and knowing that one of those lines led straight back to the Mapleford Lodge. I was not just building a company, I was building a weapon, and it was going to be beautiful. Success smells like fresh espresso and the hum of server racks in a climate-controlled room. It is a sterile, electric scent, and by November of the following year, it was the air I breathed every day. Northline Metrics was no longer two people in a living room fighting over a whiteboard. We occupied the entire fourth floor of a renovated industrial building in the tech district of Riverton. We had 30 employees. We had a break room with a ping-pong table that I never used and a coffee machine that cost more than my first car. We had just closed our Series A funding round, raising $5 million from a venture capital firm in Chicago. I was 23 years old. I was the chief financial officer of the fastest-growing logistics intelligence firm in the state. And I was tired. But it was the good kind of tired. It was the exhaustion of building an empire. Miles walked into my office on a Tuesday morning in early November. He was wearing a blazer over his hoodie now, a concession to our new status, but he still walked with the bouncy energy of a college student. "The contract is in," Miles said, dropping a thick binder on my desk. "Lakescape Hospitality Group. They signed." I ran my hand over the leather cover of the binder. This was it. This was the whale. Lakescape was a massive conglomerate. They owned boutique hotels, golf resorts, and wedding venues across the Midwest. They were struggling with their supply chain, linens arriving late, food spoilage in their kitchens, housekeeping supplies getting lost in transit. They had hired Northline to audit their entire logistics network and take over the management of their regional distribution. "This doubles our revenue," I said, opening the binder to check the signature page. "This validates the valuation." "It does more than that," Miles said, sitting on the edge of my desk. "They gave us access to their expansion targets folder. They want us to run a preliminary logistics cost analysis on 3 properties they are looking to acquire before the end of the quarter. They want to know if the locations are viable for their supply route." "Fine," I said, turning to my monitors. "Send me the data packets. I will run the location analytics this afternoon." Miles pinged the files to my secure server. I opened the folder named Acquisition Targets Q4. There were 3 files. The first was a ski resort in Michigan. The second was a historic hotel in downtown Cincinnati. I clicked on the third file. The name on the screen made my blood run cold. The hum of the office faded away. The sound of typing, the low murmur of phones ringing, the traffic outside. It all vanished. Target property, Mapleford Lodge. Location, Riverton outskirts. Current owners, Mapleford LLC, Harold and Lydia Carpenter. I sat there, frozen. My hand hovered over the mouse. It was a coincidence. It had to be. But then, in my line of work, you learn that there are no coincidences. There are only data points converging. Lakescape Hospitality Group specialized in buying distressed assets, properties that were failing, drowning in debt, or mismanaged, and turning them into profitable corporate venues. If they were looking at the Mapleford Lodge, it meant one thing. The lodge was failing. I opened the file, because we were their logistics partners. Lakescape had shared the preliminary due diligence documents with us, so we could assess the cost of servicing the location. I wasn't just looking at a map anymore. I was looking at the financial autopsy of my stepmother's dream. I scrolled through the profit and loss statements. It was a bloodbath. Lydia had projected a net profit of 15% in the first year. The reality was a loss of 12%. The occupancy rate was abysmal, hovering around 40%. But the real story was in the liabilities column. They had taken out a second mortgage, then a line of credit against the equity, then a high-interest business loan. I looked at the vendor list. Past due was stamped next to the linen service, the landscaping company, and the high-end catering supplier. "Oh, Lydia," I whispered to the empty office, "you really are bad at this." She was drowning. The business empire she had bragged about, the legacy she had stolen my inheritance to build, was a house of cards. And now, she was trying to sell it. She was trying to cash out. If Lakescape bought the lodge, they would pay off the debts, and Lydia and Harold would likely walk away with a small but significant check. They would wash their hands of the failure, bury the evidence of the stolen trust fund in the sale, and move on to their next grift. I could not let that happen. I picked up my phone and dialed Jordan Price. "Jordan," I said the moment he answered, "it is destiny. I need you to file an emergency motion." "Slow down," Jordan said. "What is going on?" "My father and Lydia are trying to sell the lodge," I said. "I have the documents in front of me. A conglomerate called Lakescape is in due diligence to acquire the property. If the sale goes through, the asset disappears, the money will be commingled, and I will never see a dime of the trust fund." "Are you sure?" Jordan asked. "I am the logistics auditor for the buyer," I said. "I am looking at their balance sheet right now. They are insolvent. Jordan, they are desperate to sell." I could hear Jordan shifting in his chair on the other end of the line. "Okay, this changes things. We were building a slow case for forensic accounting, but if they are liquidating, we have grounds for an immediate injunction. I can file for a temporary restraining order on the asset. I can argue that the property was purchased with misappropriated funds and that selling it would cause irreparable harm to the beneficiary, that is you." "Do it," I said. "Freeze it. I want a judge to sign an order that says they cannot sell, transfer, or encumber that property until the trust dispute is settled." "It is aggressive," Jordan warned. "It is going to blow up their deal with Lakescape. Once a freeze order hits the title search, Lakescape will walk away. Your parents are going to be stuck with a failing business they can't sell." "Good," I said. "That is exactly what I want." "I will have the paperwork at the courthouse by 4 o'clock, Jordan said. "Destiny, are you ready for this? Once I file this, they are going to know. This isn't a quiet investigation anymore. This is war." "I have been at war since I was 13, I said. "I just didn't have any ammunition until now." I hung up. I turned back to my computer. I had a job to do for Lakescape. I had to write a report on the logistics viability of the Mapleford Lodge. I began to type. I wrote a brutal, honest assessment. I detailed the poor road access for delivery trucks. I highlighted the distance from the main distribution hubs, which would increase fuel costs by 20%. I noted the structural inefficiencies of the loading dock, which Lydia had designed for aesthetics rather than function. I recommended that Lakescape deprioritize the acquisition based on logistical friction. I was not lying. Every word was true. I was just using the truth to tighten the noose. 2 hours later, My email notification pinged. It was not from Lakescape. It was from a personal address. Lydia Carpenter, events@gmail.com. The subject line was, Holiday Plans. I stared at it. It had been a year since I walked out into the snow. A year of silence. And now, 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, she was reaching out. I opened the email. Destiny. Your father and I have been discussing the upcoming holiday. We are hosting a very important dinner this year at the lodge. We have potential investors coming, and it is crucial that the evening remains elegant and drama-free. Given your behavior last year and the instability you displayed, we think it is best if you do not attend. We want you to take this time to reflect on your attitude and your gratitude. Perhaps we can try again at Christmas, provided you have sought some professional help. We will send a small basket to your apartment. Do not come to the lodge. Lydia. I read it twice. She wasn't just uninviting me, she was gaslighting me. She was framing my reaction to being robbed and assaulted as instability. She was protecting her investor dinner, which I now knew was likely a final wooing of the Lakescape executives. She had no idea. She had no idea that the investors she was trying to impress were reading my reports. She had no idea that the instability she feared was actually a court order currently being stamped by a clerk in the county courthouse. I felt a laugh bubbling up in my chest. It was a cold, sharp sound. They thought they could lock me out. They thought they could keep the table for themselves. I hit forward. I typed in Jordan's email address. Jordan. See attached. Please add this to the evidence file. It demonstrates continued hostility and an attempt to exclude the beneficiary from the property in question. It also confirms they are hosting a business event at the property, further commingling personal and business usage. I sent it. Then I stood up and walked to the window of my office. The city of Riverton was spread out below me. I could see the highway that led north, toward Mapleford. They don't want me at the table, I said softly, watching the cars stream by like data packets in a network. I thought about the folding chair by the kitchen door. I thought about the pie Rosa gave me. I thought about the servers humming in the room next door, processing millions of data points that I controlled. Fine, I said. If they won't give me a seat, I will buy the table, and then I will decide who gets to sit. I walked out of my office and found Miles in the server room. Is the Lakescape report done? He asked. It is done, I said. And Miles, I need you to clear my schedule for Thanksgiving. Why? He asked. Are you going home? No, I said, a dangerous smile touching my lips. I am going to work. I have a delivery to make. I went back to my desk and opened the calendar. Thanksgiving was on Thursday, the 28th. I set a reminder for 7:30 in the evening. Label: The Return. I opened the drawer of my desk. Inside, next to my high-end stapler and my company checkbook, was a photograph. It was the one of my mother laughing. We are going to get it back. Mom, I whispered. We are going to get it all back. At 4:30, Jordan texted me. The judge signed the temporary restraining order. The freeze is active. The notice will be served to them on Thanksgiving Day. I set the delivery time for the evening, as you requested. I texted back, perfect. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair. I was the CFO of a multi-million-dollar company. I was a logistician. I was a strategist. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the victim in the Carpenter family story. I was the author. I picked up my phone and looked at the photo of the family dinner they had posted last year. They looked so happy, so secure. Enjoy it. I thought, enjoy the stuffing and the turkey. Enjoy the illusion of ownership, because the bill is coming due, and I am the one collecting. I closed my laptop. It was time to go home to Valerie's, drink peppermint tea, and prepare my outfit for the main event. I wasn't going to wear a delivery uniform this time. I was going to wear success, and it was going to look terrifying. The ink on the contract was still wet when I looked up at the CEO of Lakescape Hospitality Group. We were sitting in a conference room on the 42nd floor of a skyscraper in Chicago, 300 miles away from the Mapleford Lodge. but the line I had just signed stretched all the way back to my stepmother's kitchen table. "Welcome to the team, Destiny," the CEO said, extending his hand. He was a man who valued efficiency above all else, which was why he liked me. "We are counting on Northline to clean up our supply chain before the quarterly review." "We will not let you down," I said, shaking his hand. My grip was firm. "And regarding the addendum about the distressed assets?" "Standard procedure," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "If we decide not to proceed with an acquisition due to logistical unviability, Northline has the option to step in as a management partner or independent investor. It helps us mitigate risk. If you think you can fix a broken property that we don't want to touch, be my guest." He had no idea what he had just agreed to. I walked out of that building with a leather folder tucked under my arm. Inside was a contract that gave my company, Northline Metrics, the legal standing to intervene in the sale of the Mapleford Lodge. Lakescape thought they were hiring a logistics firm. In reality, they were handing me the keys to the kingdom my father had stolen. I checked my watch. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon on the day before Thanksgiving. I dialed Jordan Price. "The contract is signed," I said as I stepped into the elevator. "Lakescape is officially our client, and the right of first refusal clause is active." "Excellent," Jordan's voice crackled through the phone. "The judge signed the order 20 minutes ago. The temporary restraining order is live. I have placed a freeze on the title transfer of the Mapleford Lodge. They can't sell it. They can't refinance it. They can't even use it as collateral for a loan. It is dead in the water until the trust dispute is resolved." "Do they know yet?" I asked. "Not yet," Jordan said. "The county clerk has processed it, but per your instructions, the physical service of the notification is scheduled for tomorrow, Thanksgiving Day." 7:30, I said. 7:30, Jordan confirmed. "I have Marcus, the process server, ready. He knows the drill. He will walk right up to the front door while they are cutting the turkey." "Thank you, Jordan." "Destiny," Jordan paused. "Make sure you are ready for the fallout. This isn't just a legal maneuver. This is a grenade." "I pulled the pin a year ago," I said, watching the floor numbers count down. "I am just finally throwing it." Thanksgiving Day arrived with a gray, steely sky. At 5 o'clock in the evening, the Northline Metrics office was not empty. Usually, a tech startup on a holiday would be a ghost town, but my team was different. Many of them were misfits. People who, like me, didn't have a traditional picture-perfect family to go home to. So, we made our own. We pushed the desks together in the main open-plan workspace. There was no roasted turkey. Instead, there were stacks of pizzas from the only place open downtown, trays of sushi, and a massive pot of Valerie's spicy chili. It was chaotic. It was loud. It was real. I stood on the mezzanine level, looking down at them. Miles was laughing, trying to teach the new junior developer how to play ping pong with a clipboard. Valerie was down there too, pouring wine into paper cups and telling stories that had everyone captivated. This was the table I had built. "Hey," Miles said, appearing at my elbow. He was holding 2 slices of pepperoni pizza on a paper plate. "You have to eat. Fuel for the machine." I took the plate. "Thanks." Miles leaned against the railing, looking down at the party. Then he looked at me. His expression sobered. He knew exactly what was happening in 2 hours. He was the only one, besides Valerie and Jordan, who knew the full scope of the plan. "Are you sure you want to do this tonight?" Miles asked quietly. "We could just stay here. We could eat pizza and play video games and let the lawyers handle it on Monday. You don't have to be there when the bomb goes off." I looked at him. Miles was good. He was soft in the places where I had become hard. He wanted to protect me from the pain of seeing them. "I do have to be there," I said. "For 10 years. They treated me like a ghost in that house. If I just send a lawyer, I remain a ghost. I remain an abstraction on a piece of paper. I need them to see me. I need them to see that the destruction of their perfect life isn't coming from a faceless court system. It is coming from the daughter they threw away." "It is going to be ugly," Miles warned. "I know," I said. I took a bite of the pizza. It was cold, but it tasted better than any gourmet meal Lydia had ever served. You know, they raised me to believe that Thanksgiving was the most important day of the year. They said it was a day for gratitude. And? Miles asked. I looked down at my team, my real family, and I am grateful. I am grateful I am not like them. I am grateful that when I look around this room, I see people I respect, not assets I can use. Miles smiled. He bumped his shoulder against mine. Okay, then go get them. At 7 o'clock, I went into my private office to change. I took off my comfortable sweater and put on the charcoal wool coat I had bought specifically for this night. It was tailored like armor. Underneath, I wore a black silk blouse and sharp, high-waisted trousers. I put on boots with a heel that clicked decisively against the floor. I pulled my hair back into a sleek, low bun. I looked in the mirror. The girl with the red cheek and the tear-stained face was gone. The woman staring back was the CFO of a company valued at $20 million. She was calm. She was dangerous. I picked up a small wooden box from my desk. It was no bigger than a deck of cards. Inside was a photograph of my mother and a letter I had written to my father 3 months ago. I had rewritten it a dozen times. I still wasn't sure if I would give it to him. It depended on what I saw in his eyes when I walked through that door. I walked out to the main floor. The party was winding down. People were settling into food comas on the beanbag chairs. Valerie was waiting for me by the elevator. She was wearing her coat. Ready? She asked. Ready? I said. We went down to the parking garage. My car was waiting. A sleek black sedan that I had bought with my first dividend check. It was a far cry from the rusted vehicle I had slept in last year. I will drive, Valerie offered, reaching for the keys. No, I said, closing my fingers around the fob. I need to drive. I need to be the one steering. Valerie studied my face, then nodded. Okay, but I am right beside you. If you need to bail, we bail. If you need to scream, we scream. I am not going to scream, I said. I am done screaming. We got into the car. I started the engine. The dashboard lit up, cool and blue. I drove out of the city, merging onto the highway that led north toward the wealthy suburbs of Riverton. The snow had started to fall again, light flurries that danced in the headlight beams. It was eerie how much it looked like last year. The same road, the same weather, the same destination. But the direction of power had reversed completely. At 7:25, my phone buzzed on the center console. I glanced at it, a text message from Marcus, the process server. In position, approaching the target. I felt a tightening in my chest, a physical reaction to the adrenaline. I kept my eyes on the road. He is there, I said to Valerie. Valerie looked out the window at the passing trees. Do you think they will answer? Lydia loves an audience, I said. She will think it is a late guest or a flower delivery. She will answer. 7:30. I imagined the scene. The heavy oak door swinging open. Marcus standing there with the thick envelope. The confusion on Lydia's face. The realization that this wasn't a gift. The slow creeping horror as she read the words, temporary restraining order and immediate asset freeze. My phone buzzed again. Delivery confirmed. Subject served. Female subject was vocal. Male subject accepted the documents. It is done, I said. The words hung in the quiet air of the car. How do you feel? Valerie asked. I checked my internal temperature. I expected satisfaction. I expected glee. But what I felt was a profound, icy calm. It felt like balancing an equation. I feel focused, I said. We were 5 minutes away from the lodge. I slowed the car down. I didn't want to arrive while Marcus was still there. I didn't want to be part of the chaos. I wanted to arrive in the silence that followed the explosion. Destiny, Valerie said softly. I have to ask, if you walk in there, and Harold breaks down, if he apologizes, if he says he is sorry for everything and begs you to stop the lawsuit, what will you do? I turned the car onto the private road that led up to the lodge. The trees loomed over us, their branches heavy with snow. He had a year to apologize, I said. He had a year to call me. He had a year to fix this. He only cares now because I have his checkbook in a vice. So no mercy? I am not going there for an apology. Aunt Val, I said, tightening my grip on the steering wheel. Apologies are just words. They are cheap. I am going there for the truth. I am going there to make them sign their names to what they did. We rounded the final bend. The Mapleford Lodge rose up before us. It was lit up like a cruise ship. Golden light poured from every window. The driveway was packed with luxury cars. Mercedes, BMWs, Lexus. It looked exactly the same as it had the night I was exiled. But as I pulled my car to a stop at the bottom of the driveway, I saw something different. The front door was slightly ajar, and the silhouette of a man was standing on the porch, looking at the papers in his hand. His shoulders slumped in a posture of absolute defeat. It was my father. I put the car in park. I turned off the engine. Let's go, I said. I grabbed the small wooden box. I stepped out into the cold air. The wind bit at my face, but I didn't feel it. I felt only the heat of the moment I had been waiting for. I walked up the driveway. My boots crunched on the gravel. The sound was rhythm. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Valerie walked beside me, a silent sentry. My father looked up. He saw us emerging from the darkness. He squinted against the glare of the porch lights. "Destiny?" he called out. His voice was thin, carried away by the wind. I didn't answer. I just kept walking. I reached the bottom of the steps. I looked up at him. He looked older. His face was pale, and he was holding the legal documents as if they were burning his skin. "You can't be here," he stammered. "Lydia, she is inside. She is furious. You have to leave." "I am not going anywhere." "Dad," I said. My voice was calm, projecting easily over the distance. "I was not invited to the table, I know, but as it turns out, I own the table now." I walked up the steps, past him, and pushed the door open wide. The warmth of the house rushed out to meet me, smelling of turkey and expensive perfume, but underneath it, I could smell the fear. I stepped into the foyer. I unbuttoned my coat. I was home, and I was going to burn it down. The dining room of the Mapleford Lodge was exactly as I remembered it, yet entirely different. It was a stage set for a play that was about to be canceled. I walked past my father in the foyer. He was still clutching the legal documents Marcus had served him, his knuckles white against the heavy paper. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. But I did not stop for him. I marched straight toward the double oak doors that separated the entry hall from the dinner party. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of roasted meat, sage, and the heavy, cloying scent of expensive red wine. I could hear the low murmur of satisfied conversation. They were at the end of the meal. The dessert course, the time when belts are loosened and secrets are usually buried under layers of whipped cream. I pushed the doors open. They swung inward with a heavy, expensive whoosh. The conversation died instantly. It did not taper off. It was severed. 20 heads turned in unison. The scene was a tableau of excess. The chandelier was dimmed to a golden glow. The table was littered with the debris of a feast, half-eaten pies, crumpled linen napkins, wine glasses stained with lipstick. At the head of the table sat Lydia. She was holding a crystal flute of champagne, mid-toast. She froze. Her eyes traveled over me, starting at my boots, moving up the sharp lines of my tailored trousers, the black silk blouse, and resting on my face. She was looking for the girl in the delivery uniform. She was looking for the victim with the red cheek. She did not find her. Instead, she found the CFO of Northline Metrics. She found a woman who was wearing a coat that cost more than the catering budget for this entire evening. "Destiny," Lydia said. Her voice was ice, but I could hear the hairline fracture of panic underneath it. She lowered her glass slowly. "We were not expecting you." "I know," I said. My voice was calm, projecting clearly to the back of the room without shouting. "I received your email, Lydia, the one where you asked me not to come because I was unstable. But I thought since I paid for the roof over your head, I might as well stop by to inspect the investment. A ripple of uneasy movement went through the guests. I recognized most of them. My aunts, uncles, the local bank manager who had approved Lydia's loans, and a few men in suits I did not know, likely the Lakescape executives or potential investors she was trying to woo. My father stumbled into the room behind me. He was breathless, his face a mask of terror. He rushed to my side, reaching out to grab my elbow, trying to physically steer me away from the table. "Destiny, please," he hissed, his voice trembling. "Not here. Let's go to the kitchen. We can talk in the kitchen. Just don't make a scene in front of everyone." I looked down at his hand on my arm. Then I looked into his eyes. "The kitchen?" I asked. "You want to take me to the kitchen? Is that because the lighting is better there, Dad? Or is it because that is where you prefer to hide the things you are ashamed of?" I pulled my arm away. It was a sharp, violent motion. He recoiled as if I had burned him. "No," I said, stepping closer to the table. "I spent 10 years in the kitchen. I spent 10 years in the corner. Tonight, we are talking right here, in the light." Lydia stood up. She smoothed her skirt, trying to regain control of the room. She forced a smile that looked more like a rictus of pain. "Harold," she said, her voice tight, "escort your daughter out. She is clearly having another episode. We talked about this. It is the stress. She hallucinates things about money." She looked at the guests, widening her eyes in mock sympathy. "I am so sorry. Everyone, Destiny has been struggling with mental health issues since she dropped out of college. It is very tragic." "I didn't drop out," I said, cutting her off. "And I am not hallucinating." I walked to the empty space at the end of the table, the spot where my folding chair used to be. I placed the wooden box I was carrying on the sideboard. Then I turned to face them. "I am here to talk about the Alice Carpenter Revocable Trust," I said. The room went deadly silent. Even the clinking of silverware stopped. "And," I continued, locking eyes with the bank manager, "I am here to talk about the Mapleford Lodge." "That is enough," Lydia snapped. The mask was slipping. "Get out of my house." "It is not your house," I said, "and as of 45 minutes ago, it is not your asset to sell, either." I reached into my father's hand. He was still standing next to me, paralyzed, and I pulled the legal documents from his grasp. I tossed them onto the table. They slid across the polished mahogany, knocking over a salt shaker, and came to a rest right in front of Evan. My half-brother was sitting to Lydia's right. He was 18 now, wearing a blazer that looked too stiff on him. He looked from the papers to me, his eyes wide. "What is this?" Evan asked. "Read it," I said. Lydia lunged for the papers. "Don't touch that. Evan, it is just nonsense. She typed it up herself." But Evan was faster. He picked up the heavy packet. He saw the blue cover sheet. He saw the seal of the county court. He saw the signature of the presiding judge. "Charhas. Temporary restraining order." Evan read aloud. His voice cracked. "Plaintiff, Destiny Carpenter. Defendants, Harold and Lydia Carpenter. Regarding the misappropriation of funds from the Carpenter Trust." He looked up at his mother. "Mom, what is this?" "It is a lie," Lydia screamed. She was losing it. The composure she had cultivated for decades was shattering under the weight of the paper. "She is suing us because she is jealous. She is jealous of you, Evan. She is jealous that you have a future and she is a failure." "I am not a failure. Lydia," I said, "I am the CFO of Northline Metrics. My company is currently valued at $22 million. A gasp went around the table. The bank manager sat up straighter. The investors exchanged glances. "And do you know how I know you are trying to sell the lodge?" I asked, taking a step toward her. "Because I am the one auditing the buyer. I saw your books. Lydia, you are insolvent. You are drowning in debt. And you were planning to sell this place to cover your tracks before anyone realized you stole $250,000 from an orphan to buy it." "I didn't steal it," Lydia shrieked. "It was an investment, a family investment." "It was my mother's dying gift to me," I shouted back. The anger I had held in for a year finally broke the surface. It wasn't a tantrum. It was a volcanic eruption. It was for my education. It was for my safety. And you took it to buy chandeliers. You took it so you could play the lady of the manor while I delivered packages in the rain. My father sank into a chair. He put his head in his hands. "Harold, say something," Lydia yelled at him. "Tell them she is lying." My father said nothing. He just wept. Evan stood up. He was holding the court order in one hand and his napkin in the other. He looked at the paper, then at the lavish spread on the table. He looked at the crystal glasses. He looked at the Rolex on his wrist, a graduation gift from last spring. "Mom," Evan said. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a razor. "Did you use Destiny's money to pay for my tuition?" Lydia froze. She looked at her son, her golden boy, the one person she actually loved. "Evan, honey, it is complicated," she stammered. "Finance is fluid. We share resources in a family. We wanted you to have the best start." "Did you take her money?" Evan repeated. "We borrowed it," Lydia cried. "We were going to pay it back. Once the lodge was profitable, we were going to pay her back with interest. She wouldn't have known the difference." "So you stole it," Evan said. He looked sick. "Everything I have, my car, my school, this dinner, it is all stolen." "No, it is ours. We built this." "You didn't build anything," I said. "You bought it with a stolen credit card, and now the bill is due." I pointed to the papers in Evan's hand. "That order freezes everything," I said. "You can't sell the lodge to Lakescape. You can't sell it to anyone. The title is locked, and on Monday morning, my lawyers are filing for a forensic accounting. Every penny you spent, every latte, every manicure, every tuition payment, it is all going to be public record." Lydia turned on my father. She grabbed his shoulder and shook him. "Harold, do something. She is ruining us. She is ruining Evan's future." My father lifted his head. His eyes were red and swollen. He looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw him clearly. He wasn't just weak. He was broken. "Destiny," he whispered. "Why? Why are you doing this? Can't we just settle this? We are family." "Family?" I laughed. It was a harsh, dry sound. "Last year, when she slapped me in that kitchen, were we family then? When you told me to apologize to the woman who assaulted me, were we family then? When you let me walk out into the snow with $11 in my pocket, were we family then?" "I was trying to keep the peace," he sobbed. "You didn't keep the peace, Dad," I said. "You just helped her load the gun." "I don't want to make a scene," I said, lowering my voice to a deadly whisper. "I don't want to scream, but I will not let my mother be erased from this story. You spent her money. You tried to bury her memory. Well, she is back, and she is sitting at the head of the table now." Lydia's face twisted. She looked around the room, realizing she had lost the audience. The investors were already reaching for their coats. The relatives were staring at their plates. "You ungrateful little wretch," Lydia spat. Get out of my house right now." "No," a voice said. "It wasn't my father. It wasn't Evan. It was my grandmother, Harold's mother. She was 80 years old, a tiny woman with steel gray hair who usually sat quietly at the end of the table and ate her soup. She had never interfered. She had never spoken up against Lydia. I had always assumed she didn't care, or that she was too old to notice the cruelty. She stood up now. She leaned heavily on her cane, but her back was straight. "Grandma?" I said, surprised. She looked at Lydia. Her eyes were hard and bright, like antique diamonds. "Lydia," my grandmother said. Her voice was raspy but commanding. "You slapped this girl?" Lydia blinked. "Martha, please, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," my grandmother said. "I kept my mouth shut because Harold seemed happy. I thought you were just strict. I didn't know you were a thief." "Martha." "And I certainly didn't know you were raising your hand against my granddaughter," she continued. She looked at my father. "And you? You let her?" "Mom," Harold whimpered. "Shame on you," she said. She spat the words out. Shame on both of you. She looked at me, for the first time in 20 years. She smiled at me. It was a sad smile, but it was real. Destiny, she said. You stay right where you are. Lydia gasped. This is my house. I will decide who stays. You don't decide anything anymore, my grandmother said. She pointed a shaking finger at the door. If anyone is leaving this table tonight, it is the people who dishonored this family. It is the people who stole from the dead. She looked at the guests. Well, she said, are you going to keep eating the stolen turkey? Or are you going to show some respect? One by one, the chairs scraped back. My aunt stood up. I think I have lost my appetite, she said quietly. She walked over to me and touched my arm. I am sorry. Destiny. I didn't know. Me neither, my uncle said, standing up. This is wrong. Harold. The investors didn't say anything. They just stood up and walked out, their faces grim. They knew a sinking ship when they saw one. Lydia stood there, trembling with rage, watching her court disperse. She looked at Evan. Evan, baby, please, she begged. Don't listen to them. Sit down. Finish your pie. Evan looked at his mother. He looked at the court order still clutched in his hand. He looked at me. He took a deep breath. I am not hungry, Mom, he said. He walked around the table. He didn't go to Lydia. He came to me. He stood in front of me, tall and awkward. He looked so much like our father used to look, before the grief took him. I didn't know, Evan whispered. There were tears in his eyes. I swear to God, Des, I didn't know. I know you didn't, I said, softness returning to my voice for the first time that night. I am sorry, he said. I am so sorry I laughed last year. I was stupid. It is okay, I said. He turned to stand beside me. He turned his back on his mother. Lydia let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. She slumped into her chair at the head of the empty table. The feast was still spread out before her. The golden turkey, the cranberry sauce, the expensive wine. But there was no one left to eat it. My father was still sitting with his head in his hands, weeping silently. I looked at the scene, the wreckage of the dinner party, the truth laid bare on the mahogany table. I didn't come here to ruin your dinner. Lydia, I said, my voice echoing in the quiet room. I came to settle the bill. I reached for the wooden box on the sideboard. I hadn't opened it yet. And now, I said, I think it is time we discuss the terms of your surrender. The silence in the dining room was heavy, the kind of silence that usually follows a car crash. The guests who had not yet fled were standing by the walls, unsure whether to leave or stay to witness the execution. My grandmother stood like a statue at the end of the table, her gaze fixed on my father. Lydia was slumped in her chair, breathing in shallow, ragged gasps. I turned toward the foyer. You can come in now, I said. Jordan Price stepped through the doorway. He looked out of place in the opulent dining room of the Mapleford Lodge. He was wearing his rumpled gray suit, and his briefcase was scuffed leather, a stark contrast to the gleaming mahogany and crystal surrounding us. But he walked with the authority of a man who held all the cards. He didn't look at the food. He didn't look at the decor. He looked straight at my father. Good evening, Jordan said. His voice was calm, conversational even. I am Jordan Price. I represent Destiny Carpenter in the matter of the Alice Carpenter Revocable Trust. He walked to the table and set his briefcase down right next to the turkey carcass. The click of the latches opening echoed in the room. Who invited him? Lydia hissed, sitting up. Her eyes darted between me and Jordan. This is a private dinner. You cannot just bring a lawyer into my house. Actually, Mrs. Carpenter, Jordan said, pulling out a thick stack of files. According to the county records office, this house was purchased with funds misappropriated from a trust where my client is the sole beneficiary. So, legally speaking, you are sitting in a crime scene. He spread the documents out. It wasn't just the 3 pages I had found last year. It was everything. Jordan had been busy. Here, Jordan said, pointing to a document with a blue tab. is the original trust deed, signed by the late Alice Carpenter. It explicitly forbids the trustee, that is you, Harold, from using the principal for anything other than Destiny's direct benefit. He pointed to a red tab. Here is the wire transfer from the trust account to the Mapleford LLC holding account, dated October 14th, 2 years ago. He pointed to a yellow tab. And here is a sworn affidavit from the bank manager at the time, confirming that you, Harold, claimed these funds were for your daughter's educational real estate investment, a classification that does not exist. Jordan looked up. He took off his glasses and cleaned them on his tie. It is called conversion, Jordan said. In layman's terms, it is theft, but because you were a fiduciary, it is also fraud. And given the amount, over $250,000, it is a second-degree felony in the state of Ohio. Punishment carries a mandatory prison sentence of 2 to 8 years. My father made a sound like a wounded animal. He gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. Prison? He whispered. No! Lydia slammed her hand on the table. The silverware jumped. Stop it! Stop trying to scare him. We didn't steal it. We borrowed it. It was a loan. We were going to pay it back as soon as the Lakescape deal went through. A loan requires documentation, Jordan said dryly. It requires terms, interest rates, a repayment schedule, and most importantly, it requires the consent of the lender. Did you ask Destiny if you could borrow her entire future? She was 22, Lydia shouted. She was working in a warehouse. She didn't know what to do with that kind of money. We were protecting it. We were investing it for the family. You were investing it for yourself, my grandmother said. We all turned to her. She hadn't moved. She was leaning on her cane, her face grim. You wanted a wedding venue, Grandma Martha said, her voice shaking with disappointment. You wanted to be the queen of the county. You didn't care about the family, you cared about the applause. That is not true, Lydia cried. I did it for Evan. I did it so he could have a legacy. Don't put this on me, Evan said. He was standing next to me, still holding the restraining order. He looked pale, sick to his stomach. Don't use me as an excuse for stealing from my sister. Evan, baby, you don't understand business, Lydia pleaded. Liquidity is complex. Stealing isn't complex, Mom, Evan said. He looked at me. Is it true? About the prison time? If we press charges, I said calmly, yes, Dad goes to prison. Lydia likely goes too, as an accomplice and beneficiary of the fraud. My father looked up at me. His face was gray. He looked old. The dashing, the confident man I remembered from my childhood was gone, eaten away by years of compromise and cowardice. Destiny, he croaked. Please, I am your father. I know, I said. That is the only reason the police aren't here right now. That is the only reason Jordan is here instead of a detective. I stepped closer to the table. I picked up the wooden box I had carried with me. I opened it. Inside lay the photo of my mother, Alice. I took it out and propped it up against the wine bottle, facing him. Look at her, I said. My father flinched. He couldn't meet the eyes of the woman in the photograph. She trusted you, I said. She lay in that hospital bed, dying of cancer, and she signed that paper because she believed you would protect me. She believed that when she was gone, you would still be a father. And you took that trust, and you gave it to her. I pointed at Lydia. You let her buy curtains with it. I am sorry, he wept. I am so sorry, Des. I don't want your apology, I said. Apologies are free. This is going to cost you. One of my aunts, Aunt Clara, stepped forward from the shadows near the sideboard. She was my mother's cousin. She had been at the dinner last year. She had eaten the turkey while I walked out into the snow. Destiny, she said softly. I turned to look at her. She paused, wiping her eyes with a napkin. I sat there last year. When she hit you, I saw it, and I saw you walk out. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to cause a scene. I was afraid of Lydia. I was afraid of being cut off. She looked down at the floor. I am so ashamed. We all knew something was wrong. We knew Harold didn't have the money for this place, but we looked the other way because the parties were nice, because it was easier. She looked up at me. I am sorry. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I am sorry I failed you. I looked at her. I felt a flicker of emotion. Sadness, maybe, or pity. Thank you, Aunt Clara, I said. I appreciate that. But, I added, my voice hardening again, Lydia was right about one thing. Business is complex, and shame doesn't balance the books. I turned back to my father. Jordan reached into his briefcase again. He pulled out a single document. It was stapled in blue paper. This, Jordan said, is a settlement agreement and release of claims. He placed it on the table in front of my father. He took a heavy black fountain pen from his pocket and laid it next to the paper. The terms are simple, Jordan explained. You admit to the mismanagement of the trust assets, in exchange for Destiny agreeing not to pursue criminal charges or a civil lawsuit for fraud. You agree to immediate restitution. We don't have the money, Lydia snapped. I told you the cash is tied up in the property. We can't pay you $250,000. We know, I said. I saw your balance sheet. You are insolvent. You have no cash. So what do you want? My father asked, looking at the paper. I want the asset, I said. Lydia's mouth dropped open. What? The Mapleford Lodge, I said. The land, the building, the business, all of it. No, Lydia screamed. She lunged forward, grabbing the table. You can't have it. It is mine. I designed it. I built it. It is my life. It was bought with my money, I said. Therefore, it is mine. You are just the squatters. Harold, don't listen to her. Lydia was frantic now, pulling on my father's arm. She is trying to steal our home. She is trying to leave us with nothing. You won't be left with nothing, Jordan interjected smoothly. Destiny has generously agreed to assume the outstanding mortgage and the business debts. You will walk away debt-free. You will lose the equity, which belongs to the trust anyway, but you will keep your personal residence in town, and you will stay out of prison. He tapped the document. Option A, Jordan said. Sign the deed over to the Destiny Carpenter Trust. We settle this tonight. No police, no press, no jail. He paused. Option B, he continued. You refuse. I call the district attorney tomorrow morning. We file the criminal complaint. The assets get frozen for years while you fight a felony fraud charge. You go bankrupt from legal fees. And then you go to prison. And Destiny gets the lodge anyway in the civil judgment. The room was silent. The only sound was the wind rattling the window panes. My father looked at the document. He looked at the pen. He looked at his hands. Dad, Evan said softly. Harold looked up at his son. Sign it, Evan said. Please, I don't want to visit you in prison. Evan, Lydia shrieked. Whose side are you on? I am on the side that doesn't steal, Evan said, his voice trembling. He looked at me, and tears spilled down his cheeks. Des, I am sorry. I am sorry I laughed at you last year. I was a jerk. I wanted to be like them. I wanted to be part of the winner's circle. I looked at my brother. He was a victim of this too, in a different way. They had corrupted him with comfort. I know, Evan, I said gently. I don't need your apology, but I do need you to be better than them. I will, he whispered. My father reached for the pen. His hand was shaking so badly the pen rattled against the table. Harold, no! Lydia grabbed his wrist. Her nails dug into his skin. Don't you dare! This is my legacy. You can't give it to her. She will ruin it. She doesn't know anything about hospitality. Lydia, my father said. His voice was quiet. No, she screamed. I forbid it. We will fight. We will hire lawyers. We will lie. We will say she gave it to us. My father stood up. He pulled his arm away from her grip. He looked at her with a look of pure exhaustion. It is over, Lydia, he said. It is not over. It is, he said. I am tired. I am so tired of the lies. I am tired of pretending we are rich. I am tired of looking at my daughter and seeing a crime I committed. He looked at me. If I sign this, you really won't press charges? I keep my word, I said. Unlike you. He nodded. He sat back down. He uncapped the pen. Lydia threw herself at him, clawing at the paper. No, no, I won't let you. Jordan, I said calmly. Jordan didn't have to move. My uncle, the one who had apologized earlier, stepped forward. He grabbed Lydia by the shoulders and pulled her back. She kicked and screamed, thrashing like a child. But he held her firm. Let him do it, Lydia, my uncle said grimly. It is the only way out. My father put the pen to the paper. He signed his name, Harold Carpenter. Then he signed the second line, Trustee, Alice Carpenter, Revocable Trust. He put the pen down. He pushed the paper toward Jordan. It is done, he whispered. Jordan picked up the document. He checked the signatures. He pulled a notary stamp from his pocket. He was a notary as well, and stamped the page. Clunk, clunk. The sound was final. Thank you, Jordan said. He placed the document back in his briefcase and snapped it shut. I looked at the signature. I looked at the table. I waited for the rush of triumph. I waited for the feeling of victory. I had spent a year dreaming of this moment, imagining how good it would feel to crush them. But as I looked at my father, slumped in his chair, and Lydia, sobbing in her brother-in-law's grip, I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel glee. I felt something lighter. I felt the weight of the last 10 years lifting off my shoulders. I felt the invisible chains that had bound me to this house, to their approval, to their narrative, snap and fall away. It wasn't happiness. It was release. I walked over to the table. I picked up the photo of my mother. I wiped a speck of dust from the glass. The deed is transferred, Jordan said to me. The Mapleford Lodge is now the property of the Destiny Carpenter Trust. Technically, you are now the landlord. I looked around the room. I looked at the crystal chandelier. I looked at the velvet curtains. I looked at the half-eaten turkey. Good, I said. I looked at Lydia. She had stopped screaming. She was just staring at me with hate-filled eyes. You took everything, she whispered. No, I said. I just took back what you stole. There is a difference. I turned to my father. You have 30 days to vacate the premises, I said. That is standard eviction notice. You can take your personal belongings. The furniture stays. It is listed as business assets. 30 days? He asked weakly. But it is Christmas. I know, I said. Maybe you can stay at a motel. I hear the rates are reasonable in the off-season. I turned to walk away. I passed Evan. He was looking at the floor. Evan, I said. He looked up. You can stay, I said. If you want, there is plenty of room. He shook his head slowly. No, I need to go. I need to figure out who I am when I am not. This. He gestured to the room, to the luxury, to the lie. Okay, I said. Call me when you figure it out. I walked to the door. Jordan followed me. Grandma Martha was waiting by the exit. She reached out and patted my hand as I passed. Good girl, she whispered. I walked out of the dining room. I walked through the foyer. I stepped out onto the porch into the cold, clean night air. The snow was falling harder now, covering the world in a blanket of white. It covered the tire tracks of the guests who had fled. It covered the steps where I had sat and cried last year. I took a deep breath. The air tasted sharp. It tasted like ownership. I walked down the steps to my car. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what was happening inside. The kingdom had fallen. And for the first time in my life, the road ahead of me was entirely, completely mine. The signature on the paper was still drying. The ink glistened under the crystal chandelier, a stark black line that divided my life into before and after. The room was painfully quiet. The guests had fled, leaving behind a wreckage of half-eaten food and shattered social pretenses. The only people left were the broken remnants of the Carpenter dynasty. My father, slumped and defeated. Lydia, trembling in the grip of a reality she could not scream away. Evan, standing apart like a survivor of a shipwreck. And my grandmother, watching it all with the weary eyes of a woman who had seen too much. I reached out and took the settlement agreement. I folded it precisely, once, twice, and slid it into the inside pocket of my coat. It sat against my ribs, a heavy, reassuring weight. "It is done," I said. My voice was soft, but in the silence of the dining room, it sounded like a gavel striking a sounding block. I turned to leave. I had what I came for. I had the truth. I had the asset. I had the vindication. There was nothing left to say. Destiny? My father's voice stopped me. It was a fragile, desperate sound. I turned back slowly. He was looking at me with eyes that were red-rimmed and pleading. He looked like a man waking up from a long, expensive dream to find himself in a cold room. "Next year," he stammered, his hands fluttering uselessly over the tablecloth. "For Thanksgiving. Will you come back? I mean, we will be in a different place, a smaller place. But we could start over. We could fix this." I stared at him. The audacity of the question took my breath away. He had just signed away his home to avoid prison for stealing my inheritance. And he was asking about turkey reservations. It was tragic. He still believed that if we just set the table nicely enough, we could pretend the rot underneath didn't exist. "Dad," I said. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel the burning heat that had carried me through the night. I just felt a profound, vast distance. "Do you remember last year? Do you remember watching me walk out that door?" He nodded, tears spilling onto his cheeks. "I do. I dream about it." "I waited for you," I said. "I sat in my car at the bottom of the driveway for 10 minutes. I waited for you to come out. I waited for you to text. I waited for you to call me the next day, or the next week. I waited for a year." "I was afraid," he whispered. "Lydia said—" "I don't care what Lydia said," I cut in gently. "You are my father. You were supposed to be the one person who didn't need permission to love me." I took a step back, moving toward the foyer. "You asked if I will come back," I said. "But Dad, you are missing the point. I never left this family. This family left me. You traded me for a wedding venue. You traded me for peace and quiet. You can't trade me back just because the venue went bankrupt." "Please," he begged, "don't say that." "I am not saying it to hurt you," I said. "I am saying it so you understand. The chair at this table isn't mine anymore. It never was." Lydia stood up then. She looked small. The rage had drained out of her, leaving only a frantic, clawing desperation. She looked at the room she had decorated, the curtains she had chosen, the life she had constructed out of lies. "You can't just take it," she whispered. "Destiny, please. I poured my soul into this place, the lodge. It is my identity. If you take it, who am I?" I looked at her. I saw the fear behind the cruelty. She was a woman who believed she only existed if she had an audience. "I am not taking your identity, Lydia," I said. "And I am not taking your home. I am just taking back the things you never had the right to hold. You built a castle on a foundation of sand, and you are surprised it collapsed. This isn't theft. It is gravity." I turned to my grandmother. She was standing by the door, her hands resting on her cane. She looked at me, and her face softened. She lifted one hand and beckoned me closer. I walked over to her. She smelled of lavender and old paper, a scent I remembered from childhood summers. She reached up and cupped my face in her trembling hands. Her thumbs brushed over the cheek where Lydia had slapped me a year ago. "I am proud of you," she whispered. Her voice was raspy, but fierce. "Alice would have been proud of you too. You stood up. You broke the cycle." "Thank you, Grandma," I said, feeling a lump rise in my throat. "Don't look back," she told me, her eyes locking onto mine. "You drive away from here, and you don't look back. There is nothing in this house for you but ghosts." She pulled me into a hug. It was brief and frail, but it felt like a blessing. It felt like permission to let go. I stepped back. I reached into my bag and pulled out the small wooden box I had brought with me, the one containing the photo of my mother and the letter I had written. I walked back to the table one last time. I placed the box in front of my father. "What is this?" he asked, staring at it. "It is a letter," I said. "I wrote it 3 months ago. I wasn't sure if I was going to give it to you. It says everything I couldn't say tonight. It says everything I have wanted to say since Mom died." He reached for it. "Don't read it now," I said. "Read it when you are alone. Read it when you are ready to be honest with yourself." I looked at Evan. He was watching me with a mixture of sadness and awe. "Take care of yourself, Evan," I said. "The offer stands. If you need a way out, call me." "I will," he said. "Bye, Des." "Goodbye," I said. I turned around. My heels clicked against the hardwood floor. I walked through the foyer, past the mirror where I had checked my reflection earlier. I didn't look at it this time. I knew who I was. I opened the heavy front door and stepped out. The cold hit me like a physical wave, shocking and clean. The snow was falling steadily now, thick, white flakes that dampened the sound of the world. The landscape was identical to the night I was exiled. The same dark trees, the same long, winding driveway, the same biting wind. But everything was different. Last year, I had walked down these steps shivering, broken, and penniless, feeling like I had been discarded. The cold had felt like an assault. Tonight, the cold felt like a baptism. I buttoned my coat. I walked down the steps, my boots crunching in the fresh powder. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the icy air. It tasted sweet. It tasted like freedom. Valerie was waiting in the passenger seat of my car. She saw me coming and sat up straight. I got into the driver's seat and closed the door, sealing out the wind. The silence of the car wrapped around us. "Did you get it?" Valerie asked softly. I patted the pocket where the settlement agreement sat. "I got it." "And Harold?" "He signed," I said. "It is over, Val. It is finally over." Valerie let out a long breath and reached over to squeeze my shoulder. "You did good, kid. You did real good." My phone buzzed on the dashboard. The screen lit up with a photo of Miles making a silly face. I pressed the speaker button. "Tell me you are alive," Miles's voice boomed through the car speakers. "And tell me you are hungry, because the team just ordered 3 more pizzas and a chocolate cake that is frankly obscene." I smiled. It was the first real genuine smile I had felt on my face all night. It started in my chest and warmed me all the way to my fingertips. "I am alive, Miles," I said, "and I am starving." "Did you win?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. Looking up at the rearview mirror, I could see the lights of the Mapleford Lodge receding behind me as I put the car in gear. "I won." "Excellent," Miles shouted. "Hurry back. The ice cream is melting." "Miles," I said, my voice catching slightly. "Do me a favor?" "Anything, boss." "Set an extra place at the table," I said. "Pull up a chair. Make sure it is empty." "Who is it for?" Miles asked, confused. "Is your dad coming?" "No," I said. "It is for the girl who walked out into the snow last year. It is for the girl who thought she wasn't worth anything because she wasn't invited. I want to save a seat for her, so she knows she finally made it home." There was a pause on the other end of the line, a warm, understanding silence. "You got it, Des," Miles said softly. "We will save her the best spot, right next to the cake." "I will be there in 20 minutes, I said. I hung up. I turned the car onto the main road. The tires gripping the snow, I accelerated, leaving the winding country roads behind, heading toward the glow of the city on the horizon. Voiceover. We grow up believing that the table we are born at is the only one that matters. We fight for a seat. We endure the insults. We swallow the pain just to stay in the room. We think that if we leave, we will starve. I merged onto the highway. The city lights of Riverton spread out before me, a grid of gold and amber against the dark. Somewhere in that grid, on the 4th floor of an industrial building, there was a group of people waiting for me. There was loud music. There was cheap wine. There was loyalty that hadn't been bought, but earned. Voiceover. But sometimes, the greatest blessing is the invitation that never comes. The greatest gift is the door that slams in your face, because it forces you to walk out into the cold. It forces you to realize that you have hands, you have wood, you have nails. I drove faster, the engine purring beneath me. I was driving toward Northline Metrics. I was driving toward my future. Voiceover. There are some tables that are not meant for us, and that is okay, because we were born to build our own. I pulled into the parking lot of the office building. I could see the lights on the 4th floor. I could see the silhouettes of my friends, my chosen family, moving around. I turned off the engine. I stepped out of the car. I looked up at the window, and I saw Miles waving. I waved back. I walked toward the building. I walked toward the elevator that would take me up to the life I had constructed from the wreckage of the past. I was Destiny Carpenter. I was the girl who was erased. I was the woman who wrote herself back into the story. And tonight, I was going to eat cake at my own table. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have ever felt like you didn't belong at the table you were born into, I want to hear from you. Comment below and tell me which city you are listening from, so we can connect and share our strength. Please make sure to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so this story can reach everyone who needs to know that they have the power to build their own table.